Hey, welcome into a bonus episode of Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange, joined by Josh Jordan, who you can read daily at sportsmap.com. Follow him on X at JoshJordan975. If you enjoy the video, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and click that bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops. Josh, we're all excited about the upcoming Dodgers series over the weekend, but the headline of the day seems to be, look, you didn't get the results out of the Oakland series that we were hoping for, but the real talking point out of that is Hunter Brown. 12 consecutive starts of at least 6 innings or more, 11 of those quality starts. This is much more like the guy we had envisioned when everybody was calling him Baby Verlander. That's a lot to live up to, admittedly, but he's pitching with a ton of confidence right now. I don't know about you, kind of reminds me a little bit of Roger Clemens on the mound. Got that chip on his shoulder, piss and vinegar when he's throwing the ball. It's pretty fun to watch as an Astros fan. Look, we don't want to put the cart too ahead of the horse here. Obviously, Houston still has a ton of season left, and this team has a ton of questions still left to answer. But as it stands right now, I'm curious of your thoughts. I'm curious of our viewers' thoughts. So they can answer this as well. I encourage, if you're watching this, we welcome your feedback. So put comments below. If you're listening to this, you can always tweet it, either Josh or myself directly. So I wanted to ask you, and I think this is a good thought exercise based on where the team's at right now. Is Hunter Brown the second most important pitcher on this team as we speak?
Yeah, probably. Verlander's not here, and who knows with all the other guys. I guess Fromber's probably who you have at number one for the most important pitcher. And you could argue Hunter Brown's been pitching a lot better than Fromber lately. But if we're talking about pedigree, playoff experience, you got to give the nod to Fromber there, even though he can just kind of lose it at any moment. That his defense can get you in a bind, or he can walk 5 or 6 guys in a game, but he's so good. He can walk 5 or 6 guys in a game and still get the win and pitch an effective game, getting those double play balls. And we know what Fromber can be when he's good Fromber, but Hunter Brown, this is what we've been waiting for. You alluded to it, all the Baby Verlander stuff. Well, now we're actually seeing the production of somebody that should be called Baby Verlander. So I love what I'm seeing from Hunter Brown. And to me, it's all about that sinker. It has changed absolutely everything. It's just a deal where all those other pitches were breaking outside to right-handed hitters. He didn't have anything to keep them honest on the inner third of the plate, so they could dive out and hit the cutter, hit the breaking ball, hit the fastball. Chandler Rome talked about in one of his pieces on Hunter Brown, like even his fastball has a little bit of cut on it that goes, outside to a right-handed hitter. So have something that comes in on a righty. And let's not forget, dude throws hard. Hunter Brown living in the mid to upper 90s. So if you have to respect that up and in or down and in with that sinker tumbling in there in the mid to high 90s, and then you still have to be able to cover a slider or a cutter on the outside part of the plate, it keeps you honest. You can only defend so much of the plate. And hitters are seeing that, and how often he's throwing it. That's what's amazing. You're seeing less four-seam fastballs because the two-seamer is so effective. And that's another thing in that article that Chandler Rome brought up. He's really only using it against right-handed hitters. Against lefties, he's going to other weapons, which makes sense. It's a really effective pitch against righties. It's turned him into a totally different guy. And what's great about it is it doesn't feel like, oh, guys are going to adjust to that, and then he'll go back to having an ERA over 5. I just think this has been the missing piece in his arsenal. It's something that he had in college. He didn't really throw a lot in the pros. And we see that things are in and out of style in baseball. Sometimes the sinker was super popular in the 90s. And, now it's all about high velo and high four-seam fastballs, stuff like that. And of course, sweepers. Yeah. And for Hunter, this is the pitch. This is what separates him. And let's face it, you face more right-handed hitters than anything else in baseball. Just look at the world. There's more righties than lefties. So I think this is a fix that's going to last.
Well, and it's why I asked the question. I think you hit on a lot of things that I feel like that we're seeing, and I feel the same way. That's why I wanted to ask the question, because look, I agree with you. Fromber has the experience. Dude pitched nails in a closeout game in the World Series just a couple years ago. We know he's highly volatile, but when Fromber's on, there's few better than him in the game. You talked about his ability to wipe out traffic on the plates. That's so huge for a pitcher to be able to work out of trouble like that. JV has the health questions. Ronel Blanco's been nails for most of the year, but his increased workload plus that downtick in velo is concerning. So Hunter's been the most consistent, as you said, throughout the year. And even when we're talking about just the entire pitching staff, the bullpen has redundancy, right? You've got Hader, but you also have Ryan Presley, you've got Abreu, and even Taylor Scott has, been able to show a propensity to be able to throw in leverage situations. So you've got a little bit of redundancy towards the back end of your bullpen. Obviously, the middle of that bullpen has question marks for sure. They hope to remedy that at the trade deadline, hopefully. But I just look at where they're at right now. I think it's so, like, where would you be without Hunter Brown throwing the way he's throwing right now? Obviously Ronel Blanco as well, but like looking at it long term, kind of looking at how the rest of this season plays out, I think Hunter Brown is the second most important pitcher on this staff. We were talking about something right before we hit record on this that Chandler dropped in his article today about Bregman working with Brown and also Spencer Arrighetti. But what did you think about? I thought it was pretty interesting. Bregman working with Hunter Brown and kind of helping him discover or rediscover or utilize better that two-seamer.
Bregman, we know he's a great hitter. He's just a film rat. He thinks about baseball all the time, and he's watching and, just kind of keeping an eye on what's going on and keeping tabs on how guys are using certain pitches. And I thought it was interesting. Blummer talked about on the broadcast the other day about how the infielders have the PitchCom earpiece as well. So guys like Bregman can hear what pitches are being called to certain hitters and certain counts. And I'm sure he has opinions about that stuff, as he should. And what I thought was interesting is he was the one that said, Hunter, why don't you try working in that two-seam fastball? With that tailing inside a little bit and the velocity, it might open up the outside part of the plate, which is where Hunter's so good. He has so many put-away pitches out there. And Bregman was right. And it was in that Mariners series. And it also talked about in the article that Hunter Brown was like, he was watching some of the Mariners pitchers working back and forth between their 2- and 4-seam fastballs and having success. We know how good those Mariners pitchers are, so why not take a play out of their playbook and implement it? So it's working great. I thought it was interesting with Spencer Arrighetti, where Bregman just asked him, like, why did you throw Lewis Robert Jr. that slider there? And Arrighetti was, it's my best pitch. It's why not? That's my strength. And that's kind of the thing in sports, right? Like, you want to do what you do best and make the other team, change their plan or whatever. Sometimes that doesn't work. There's not always this always works in sports. Sometimes that person's strength is better than your strength. So just avoid that and you might get a better outcome. So I think, Spencer Arrighetti, he's new to baseball. He's learning. And guys like Bregman, they've been here before. And I think it's great that he's also talking to the catchers. He's not going into meetings or anything like that, but they're having conversations about, how about we approach this guy like this, or what's the game plan for him? And it's just great to see a veteran player that knows baseball helping. And, they also point out in the article, Maldy's gone and Brantley's got a lot of the veteran leadership. Dusty Baker's gone. It's probably the right time where some of these veteran players might need to step in here. And if they can help out and offer some good advice, why not take advantage of it? I'm reminded, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember this right, when Roy Oswalt was having some trouble. He was throwing a lot of two-seam fastballs. He wasn't as effective. And he asked Lance Berkman just to step in the box and just kind of observe what his pitches look like as they're coming in. And if I remember right, Berkman was like, the two-seam fastball's fine. That was when it was real in vogue to throw the sinkers and pitch to contact, back, late 90s, early 2000s. And Berkman was like, man, with your curveball, it feels like that four-seamer, it's harder to get to. So as a hitter, I wouldn't want to see that as much. And Oswalt, if I remember correctly, let me know in the comments. I'm pretty sure about this. I don't think I dreamed it. Oswalt found that was beneficial and that he did go back to more four-seam fastballs because that's what works for him. He's not Greg Maddux. Every pitcher has certain things they're good at. And, also Maddux couldn't throw 95 miles an hour like Oswalt. So we've seen stuff like this before where hitters can have just a different perspective than pitchers. Sometimes you get in your little bubble and some outside advice can make a big difference.
When we were talking about this, one of the things it reminded me of, and this is going to be another one of those vague recollections that I do invite feedback on if I'm wrong, or I know I'm not wrong on it, but I don't remember who the hitter was. So it was a few years back. Bregman was at the All-Star game, and the quote came from another player. I don't remember who the player was, but there was a hitter. He said that he had a chance to speak with Bregman during the weekend, and Breggy asked him, do you prefer two seamers or four seamers? And the guy said, it took him off guard. He's like, I've never really thought about it. And so just a quick window of interaction with Bregman, he seemingly helped appear be more thoughtful about his at bats. Like, what am I really looking for as a batter? What do I handle better? And, what should I be sitting on? And so as we're talking about this, you brought it up. Like, there's been a attrition of leadership on this team. Bregman's departure looks even more consequential if he is indeed departing this team after this season. This team has lost a lot of veteran leadership. We joke about the Correa mound visits and Maldy's guidance of the pitchers, but it is a little concerning to lose one more veteran. And again, maybe his offensive production is not as consistent as it used to be. It's taking longer and longer for him to get in his groove during the season, but the guy has a mind for the game, and he's giving you some insightful thought and reflection on situations that Murphy and Miller just, I guess, haven't had the same, I don't want to downplay their influence on the pitching staff, but it clearly was something that Bregman, observed, has influenced, and they've seen really good results on. Now, I don't know how many times that happens, but obviously this is specifically credited to Bregman. And so it's a real concern if you're losing one more of these guys that has been so influential. And how influential? Well, I mean, since May 5th, Brown has the third best ERA, behind guys like Garrett Crochet and Corbin Burns. He's at 2.51 since May 5th. Joe Espada saying Brown's got that ace feeling to him. Yeah, I agree. The eye test, he passes the eye test when you talk about that. So not knowing what Houston does at the deadline, how does Brown's production now influence your thoughts about how this team lines up their rotation for a potential postseason series?
I mean, he's got to be at least top three, and I would say top two, but Justin Verlander, that guy's done a few things in Major League Baseball, so
yeah.
I can't possibly know what Joe Espada is going to write out on that card for sure. And who knows, maybe Verlander's pitching lights out by the time we get to the postseason. We just, we don't know right now as we sit in July. But if we're talking about performance, you got to look at Hunter Brown, with you pointed to, third best ERA in the AL since May 5th. And it's the stark difference there. In one of these same articles, Josh Miller was talking about, we were worried that Hunter Brown may not figure it out before we'd have to send him back to the minor leagues, which wasn't really a possibility because the Astros they have such little at the minor league level. It allowed Hunter Brown to stay up with the big league club and kind of figure things out, work through it, and it paid off. And it's such a, this guy had an ERA over 5, and now he's one of the best pitchers in the American League. So for me, it's got to be, Framber, Hunter Brown, and Justin Verlander, however you want to order it. I think it's one of those guys. And then Ronel Blanco, those are the guys, and we'll see what they do at the deadline. If they somehow grab the top of the rotation starter, that could change my opinion. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think they're going to add some arms. But yeah, I think those are your 4 right there. And, I think you're probably right. They might roll with Framber, but if JV is looking like typical JV, I think he's going to be your first starter just based on what he's done over the course of his career. And, back to Hunter Brown, it is the sinker. It's also his confidence is building. And, Josh Miller, the pitching coach, talked about, the quote, there's a stark difference between April and June. And a lot of that's confidence related, in my opinion. No offense to Josh Miller, that would probably be my stance if Bregman was the one that fixed Hunter Brown and not me, the pitching coach. So just saying, I'd probably be leaning more into confidence. But let's be real. Confidence comes from having success,
right?
You're not super confident if you go out there and get ripped all over the ballpark every 5 days. Both of those things have to work together in conjunction. But to put a bow on it, I like this starting rotation. If they're able to grab another bullpen arm, just to kind of give them one more option outside their big three or big four, if you consider Scott one of those guys now. I think that's what's going to be. So Fromber, Hunter, Justin Verlander, and Blanco, depending on the order there, I think it's going to be who's performing the best as we get to the postseason, assuming that they do get there.
Yeah, and assuming that JV does make a return,
Right.
we're assuming a lot there too, because this IL stint has been a lot longer than we anticipated. Hard to know whether the team anticipated it being this long, because they're not really honest. Really hard to take them at face value, because it seems like they're incredibly secretive with health information of the players for whatever reason. But look, going back to the question about the postseason lineup or postseason rotation, look, if you're penciling Brown in at third, that's still a consequential game. In a DS series, a game 3 could be a closeout game, or it could be a swing game. If you're tied in a series, or it could be a stopper game. Maybe you've lost the first 2 in the series, and maybe you need Hunter Brown to go into enemy territory and pitch a good game to keep you in a series. So I don't think it's any disrespect. I mean, it's obviously showing respect to JV if he's able to pitch. And Fromber, you pencil them at 1 and 2. Brown is still consequential at 3. But let's talk about it. Verlander, he's missed so much time. It's looking like it would take a miracle for him to hit that innings threshold for his deal to vest for next year. Yeah. How does the emergence of Brown impact the team's feelings about bringing a guy like JV back for next season?
It makes you're not desperate. You've got a young guy that you can count on that's not making a ton of money, that looks like he could even be on the upswing. This guy might even be able to improve more. And then you also have to factor in, is Luis Garcia going to be back to give you something? Maybe possibly this year, but especially next year. You're counting on, you hope you get Luis Garcia back. Lance McCullers, who knows, right? I mean, no, it's hard to believe that McCullers is going to give you what you're looking for. If he does come back, maybe he's a relief option. It's just, he's had so much arm trouble. It's hard to imagine him being a productive guy that can give you 7 innings every 5 days. So I think the thing with Verlander, a lot of it's Jim Crane. He's a big Verlander guy. And it's going to be the money too, right? Like we've seen Crane let Verlander walk when he got a ton of money thrown at him by the Mets. Will Verlander get that much interest, if he doesn't, get to that innings number, that threshold this year and return to the team? So, how much is a team willing to give a guy in his 40s that's had injuries in back-to-back years? You're kind of rolling the dice there, but if you get him at a bargain, then why not? I just love watching Verlander pitch. And let's be honest, Jim Crane likes seeing the stands full. JV Day, a lot of people like to show up and watch Verlander at Minute Maid Park. And he's kind of ending his career. I've brought it up many times. I didn't want to see Nolan Ryan leave at the end of his career. You just felt like an Astro. You wanted to see him break all those records, the strikeouts and the wins. You wanted to see him do it in an Astros uniform, and he went on to the Rangers. I'd hate to see Verlander go have another great year in his 40s with another team, just because it feels like he's our guy. But if the production doesn't match and he's just not healthy enough to do it anymore, then you have to let him go. But I think that's why this trade deadline is important, Brandon, is that this move that they make, if for a pitcher here, it may not just be a move for this season. And Dana Brown said he doesn't like trading for rental players. So they may be looking long term at, like, we're gonna need another guy next year. Can we count on Blanco to do it 2 years in a row? Is Hunter Brown going to stay as good as he is? I think he is, but we don't know. Fromber can go off the rails at any minute. So, and look at the injuries they had this year. It just shows you can just lose a ton of guys and you're in big trouble. So I think it may be a long-term play what they do at starting pitching here at the deadline.
Yeah. And as for possible trades, I think this fan base needs to be prepared for a trade that's going to hurt, because you're not going to get anything back of consequence unless you're willing to give something up. So I think we all need to mentally prepare for maybe losing a player that we're not anticipating. And we talk about McCullers, long-term, and how many innings can he realistically give you as a starter. So maybe him as a bullpen option, but it's also not ideal for a guy who's had arm injuries and multiple surgeries to warm up quickly and to go into leverage situations. So that's not necessarily something that you want for a guy like Lance McCullers either. So there are some really big questions that Lance is going to have to answer in the coming years. Whether he's going to be viable as a starter or as a pitcher in general. And getting back to JV, I think anything short of a team-friendly one-year deal, I just don't see how you bring back JV. We're both big fans of him. Obviously, how can you not be a big fan of a Hall of Famer like JV and what he's helped bring to this city and this team? But it's tough to see how he fits long-term on this team if you're trying to look to build for the future. Again, I would love to see him back, but I think it's really going to have to make sense. Ultimately, Jim Crane is going to be the decision maker on that. I'll give you the final word.
Just quickly on McCullers, thought of him coming out of the bullpen. His last 2 years when he was healthy, 21 and 22, or healthy-ish, over 4 walks per 9 innings is what he averaged. You don't want to bring a guy in out of the bullpen that you're worried if they can throw strikes, and that could even make the problem worse. If you got a couple guys on base and then you bring him in and he's going to walk the first guy, that's a concern. And you're right too, with him having to warm up quickly, that could be an issue. And McCullers has said he wants to be a starter in the past, but we're at a point now where it's just like, Lance, we just got to get whatever we can out of you. And we signed you to a big long-term contract, and we want to see if we can get anything out of that deal. Personally with Verlander, I'd like to see him back, but he's got to come and show that he can still do it. They talked about in his bullpen session that he's hitting in the low 90s, 90, 91. That's fine for a guy that's not facing batters yet. You expect the velo to tick up a little bit as he gets more healthy, but is Verlander going to have to be a pitcher that changes the way he does it? When Kurt Schilling didn't throw 97 miles an hour anymore, you have to get guys out throwing 91, and that means you have to hit your spots, and you have to, your off speed stuff has to be good. It's a different type of pitching as you get older. Will Verlander adapt to that? Will he be able to command that fastball and breaking stuff and not be able to just win by, pumping it up to 97 and getting it past guys? But we'll see. I mean, we saw some certain games where Verlander was in the mid 90s and then it ticked down. Was that because of injury or is that just because of age? We don't know. But a lot of answers for us to find out about the Astros over these next few weeks.
Indeed. And I can't wait to find out those answers. That's going to be it for this bonus episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on podcast and you enjoy the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Charlie, Josh, and I will catch you next week for a brand new episode of Stone Cold Stros. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, go Stros.